So it seems as if Ireland has a Conor McGregor problem. Now, this is not a specifically idiosyncratic Ireland issue. It's just one of the outcomes, the bubbles of the flux, whereby we're able to witness what is one of those strains of recurrence historically. We saw with Spartacus in Rome. This is about the same equivalent era, that pre-Caesarian era, or Caesarism era, I should say, where we see that there is a rise of unsatisfied and particularly disgruntled, who would say underclasses, but the commonalities, the canaille. These people have had to be downtrodden over a number of years, almost successive generations, but then have to face what is this catalyzing effect. In Rome's time, it was obviously different to our own, and so it would manifest differently, but we've obviously been able to supercharge something like immigration to such a level that it's allayed and allowed for the groundwork of someone like Conor to step into a political guise. To me, I think it's very evident that this would be quite a good analogy, that Spartacus and Conor McGregor imbue both the same sort of aspects here. We have what is a warrior type who's been thrust into the spotlight due to certain societal issues. Conor himself is maybe not the banner bearer you would call for in any normal time, because obviously a 120, maybe that's generous, 110 IQ raging cokehead who's been punched in the face for a living isn't what you would call a quintessentially statesman-like figure. But obviously you don't want to just degrade or denigrate someone who is coming to market with a viable solution here, because it's less about the messenger per se than it is about the message when it comes to how normies and the plebs react. And if they feel as if their grievances aren't being heard by the status quo politicians of the day, which they aren't, then they're more than willing to, particularly in a democracy, back someone with name, clout, and some sort of stature that they feel as if would represent them and fight. Yeah, in this case, very, I think, evidently, it's manifests that Conor McGregor is used to fighting. So the act of political fighting is something that feels as if it should be an instinctual thing. We intuit that he is a capable fighter. Now, Conor, as I said before, specifically has issues he would like to address, and that's mainly due to immigration, because I think for him, there's probably not enough money in the world, or ladies, or adulation, and glory, honor, all of these things that he would be able to obtain. You can see from the way that he conducts himself, he's no longer really in the mindset of what makes a fighter great. A fighter has a very brief period where they're hungry enough and they have the dog in them enough to conquer those against them, that they're willing to sacrifice everything basically. When you become a champion, there is this notion that you're only going to be as high as you ever are right now, and that defending a crown is less of it's more arduous, it's more of a laborious effort than it is something to strive for, than it is, I'm going to establish my legacy just by doing what I do. You can see in some champions that there's a notion towards perfection. Maybe, I'm not sure if you're aware of sports, but someone like Tom Brady, who was basically excellence as a habit. And because you have a guy like that who's just breathing and pissing excellence, then anything he does and touches just turns into being a champion. And that's correspondent. He's not aiming to be a champion, say, per se. He's aiming to be the best always and forever, and it just happens to be that the way that we record that is by him being a champion, whereas someone like Conor is much more attracted to the status, and the hunger he had was coming from nothing to something. But once you have that thing, obviously the impetus leaves you. It's almost a dissolution effect. So what Conor now sees, I think, is his part two of his life. It's that I've now been this businessman, I've been this success, commercially and via sports, obviously. But in general, we feel as if he is a lauded figure, and lionized by all of those, for us, maybe less than salubrious folks, but the hearty middle middle ground folks in general who are big Conor supporters, they tend towards liking him because of his earnestness, because of the way that he conducts himself isn't pretentious, and he does just come to you with what he's thinking in that way. And he's obviously slightly charming and has that sort of panache, piquancy. But I think the grounding for this is that we probably had the same experience in Rome if we were seeing Spartacus, the gladiator, fighting, and Crixus and all of these lieutenants of his, the gladiators, because when they are in the arena dominating like that, we try to arrogate certain, say, temperament and skills and maybe acumen to them that we then transpose politically. We say, like, once they're in the arena trying to win, we can put them in any arena and they'll try and win. I think it goes back to maybe Conor McGregor's 110 IQ minus how many knockouts he's had and how many punches to the face and how many lines of coke he's snorted, is still, you could say, at the functional level for him that speaks to the normie tier voter. And that's important, particularly in a country like Ireland, where they aren't that far removed from being, you almost want to say, the backwaters of the West. They were, for all intents and purposes, the doldrums throughout the 19th, 20th centuries, reflected in their immigration levels, because they've had such an outflux of people that they still remain quite a small nation, even though their diaspora is one of the largest in the world, Western world. So I think for us, it's this maybe empathetic understanding as to how can you position yourself in the normal Irishman's shoes. How do we take his countenance and say, I refuse to accept more violence against my people? Everyone in the West is facing violence from immigrants, third worlders. This is not something specific to, as I said, idiosyncratic to Ireland. It's that the Irish tend towards violence as almost second nature for reasons I've covered previously, that the Irish and the Scotch made some of the best soldiers in the British Empire because of their hot-headedness, and that having a irascible and truculent force backed by a very well-organized Anglo-Germanic spirit allowed for the British and American empires to flourish. But you can then, say, aim that inwards, and if the Irish are almost always ready at some point to embroil themselves in combat, in war, then it is something where the trigger only needs to be pulled, and Conor McGregor is for sure someone who could pull that trigger, and I think it's well within his wheelhouse to be able to control that in a semi-effective way. This, you could say, quasi-civil war would be kicked off by the liberal entrenched democratic parties, and then mostly Conor McGregor fans on the other side, which is what tends toward right wing or right-leaning men, maybe below the age of 55, something like this. Now, will he be successful in his venture, his voyage into politics? It's, I think, too early to say. Spartacus obviously had a different environment in which he was able to foment a rebellion and a full-scale violent uprising against the Roman state. But with Conor, I think obviously he'll still lean into what is the traditional means of Western politics, which is at the moment democracy. But it remains to be seen how much of a force that is for change. There are only so many things that can be done in a democratic system, particularly one like Ireland that's going through its first pseudomorphosis. And I think it's very important for us to understand that if Ireland is successful, they can actually be the case, the test study to a lot of degree around, can you reclaim your nation from new immigrants, this latest, say, 50-year wave of immigrants from the third world? Can it be something where it's possible to just deport them? I mean, it's obviously conceptually very possible, and even legally in function, it's very easy to deport people, but the political will has always been, say, absent for most of those who would not have the stomach that what it takes is to deprive people of their better life in our country. And so I think it's worth paying attention to Ireland. It is the canary in the coal mine, perhaps, or it's at least the test case of what can happen when a man with a Caesar-like backing, and that is to say he's established himself irrespective of politics. So he's a man with a following that doesn't, so you could, this is the way that Spengler puts it, is these men of facts, these men of realities that just move things and do things. They're prone to action, they're predisposed to these things. Is to say, once you have an army, a following in this way, it becomes less important about having moneyed politics, because the force politics, these men of facts, just do the things. And so you'll see this on a very low level. Ireland is a very insignificant nation, all things considered, but it is also, once again, one of these test beds where we can actually understand the ramifications in a very interesting and hopefully, for Ireland's sake, in a productive and beneficial way. So I would say over the next 5 years, Conor will probably run for politics very seriously, and it'll be determined how A, successful, but B, violent it ends up being in terms of how the Irish system reacts to someone like Conor. He is we say, very vociferous and or vitriolic person when it comes to being in challenging or combative situations. So his nature might predispose him to, if not fighting, then verbally abusing his you could say opponents in this realm, and I think that will also be well received. Things, not just the Irish people, but the specific Irish people he's targeting do like that part of him, and so if he can sway those, and then has some form of political backing and can win political seats and real political power, you can see this rise of the Conor McGregor 2.0. This is the president, the Siege Conor McGregor. Whether that's going to achieve its end results, I think, is secondary to seeing the effect of our modern day Spartacus.